be sure to do some tips and tricks for hamster photography. So first of all, I am not in any way a professional photographer. All these tips are just my tips that I have learned from experience when taking pictures. I'm not good or anything. I just thought that I would share these hamster photography tips with you since this was actually a very requested video that I have gotten many requests for. So let's go ahead and get right into the video. So starting with probably the most important part of having really good hamster photography, and that is having good lighting. This is so important because photography is basically writing with light. Lighting is so important. It really is the biggest thing that makes a difference between a good and a bad picture, because it doesn't matter what kind of camera you have. You could have the most expensive, fanciest camera in the world. If you don't have good lighting, it's not going to turn out the way you want it to. So you're probably wondering, well, what kind of lighting do I use? So the very best kind of lighting that you can get for hamster photography is studio light. If you're going to invest in studio lights, however, you want to be sure you are aware of the wattage of the light bulbs. Now, they sell several different wattages, and the wattages basically determine how bright the lights are. You really want them to be nice and bright. I recommend 105 watts. Make sure they're the actual watts. Sometimes they'll put like equivalent to 85 watts or 105 watts when they're actually a 40 watt light bulb. I've had this experience and it doesn't really, it helps for sure, but it's definitely worth paying a little bit of extra money to find 105 watt light bulbs. These are the studio bulbs that I take pictures and film with. They are quite big. I have 2 of them. That is all I need. In fact, for most of my pictures, 1 is all I need. If you do not have any studio lights, however, you can still get some good pictures. You're just going to want to get as much light as you possibly can. So turn on the room lights. If there's a little bit of sunlight left, open the windows and bring in all the lamps that you can plug in and shine them on your set, and you can hopefully get some decent pictures. Just make sure you use as much lighting as you possibly can. As an added note, most household lamps and lighting have tungsten lighting, which gives out that orangish look to your pictures. I'm sure you've seen it before. So you're going to want to try to find light bulbs that are as white as possible. This can mostly be corrected when you are editing your picture, but I still would like to let you know that when you use those type of lights, it is going to give you that orange glow to your pictures. And lastly, on the topic of lighting, I would like to say that you can probably make a really good light for under $15. I've seen tons of DIY tutorials on YouTube, so just like search on YouTube DIY YouTube light or something, and I'm sure you will be able to find a really good DIY tutorial on how to make a very cheap but very bright light for your hamster pictures. Now on to what is the best camera that you can use to make really good hamster pictures. How do you get the beautifully blurred backgrounds and all those other questions that are camera related. So probably the very best camera for taking hamster pictures is a DSLR camera. This is the camera I use. However, it can get quite expensive depending on which one you get. You don't need like a super fancy one to get good hamster pictures, because what really matters is the lens that you use. But for an entry-level DSLR such as the T5i that I use, or the T3i or T3, you're probably going to end up paying about $500 with the lens, so it's definitely not the most cheap camera in the world, but it is really amazing. However, if you don't have a DSLR, you can still get good hamster pictures. Lighting is probably the most important thing, like I said. I remember I took hamster pictures with my dad's iPhone for the longest time, and a lot of those pictures are still some of my favorites to this day. In fact, with the camera technology and megapixels of today's phones' cameras, you can make some really nice pictures as long as you have good lighting. However, if you do have a DSLR or you're wanting to get one and you're wondering, well, how can I get the blurred backgrounds that I see in a lot of pictures? The answer to that is you're going to want a lens that gives you a narrow depth of field and has a longer focal length. Now, unfortunately, I don't have time to explain all that the aperture, ISO, and shutter speed of DSLR cameras do. These are all very important for getting good hamster pictures. However, Google it and you will see several tutorials and websites all about how you can learn about these 3 things that make up the exposure of your camera. It's very important that you look those up and understand them because they're very important. But basically, the smaller the number of f-stops, the more blurred your background's going to get. For example, one of the most popular, cheapest lenses is the Canon 50mm 1.8. It's about $125 and it has a nice blurry background of 1.8. That's a really, really good lens. The lens that I use for my hamster photography that is my absolute favorite is the Canon 60mm f2.8 macro. It actually has a smaller aperture than the 50mm 1.8, so it's not going to give you as blurred of a background. However, the focal length is a little bit longer and it's a macro lens so that you can really focus close on the tiny details of your hamster. So it's really amazing. I get all of my hamster pictures pretty much with this lens and I highly recommend it. However, it is quite expensive compared to the 50mm 1.8. It is, I believe, like $400, but I love macro photography too and I thought it was definitely worth the price. Lastly, on the topic of cameras, I would like to talk a little bit about the actual camera settings that are best for taking hamster pictures. So this is my DSLR screen, and on the top, like I said, it's really, really important that you know your ISO, your aperture, and your shutter speed. Those are the 3 things that you see on the top bar. So these are typically the settings that I normally use for taking hamster pictures, starting with my ISO. It depends on how many lights I have. Sometimes I just want to take a quick picture and I'll just pull out one light, which is plenty of light, and then I will usually go with ISO of 400 because I want it to be properly exposed, but I could probably easily go with 200 and just brighten it up in Lightroom. Depending, especially if I have 2 lights, I will do ISO of 200. And then I have my aperture wide open at f2.8. And my shutter speed, I try to do at least 1/250th of a second. The higher the number, like 1/320th of a second, for example, is going to freeze the action of your hamster faster. So you want to go as high as you possibly can while keeping light in the picture because hamsters are really fast, and having a higher shutter speed will make sure your pictures don't get blurred by the motion. Unless your hamster is like perfectly still, the very minimum that I would ever go for hamster pictures is probably 1/200th of a second. Even then, I still find that I get quite a few blurred pictures of the motion. So yeah, definitely try to go at least to 1/250th of a second. And then down here you can see that I always shoot in RAW. Before I got Adobe Lightroom, I always used to shoot in JPEG. That is probably the most common format when taking pictures. But what RAW does is it's a really large file. It's around 20 megabytes per picture, and it's like really unmodified, and it retains all the data from the picture so that you can brighten it up and enhance it without losing image quality, because JPEGs are kind of like already edited in a way, I guess is the best way of explaining it. But you are going to need a program to be able to edit your pictures, like Adobe Camera Raw or Lightroom, or I think Photoshop. I'm not exactly sure because I don't have Photoshop, but yeah. I'll talk about editing softwares in a second, but I shoot in burst, as you can see here, and what this does is it basically allows you to shoot constantly. This is important for when your hamster is moving around. And I also, for the focusing, I do AI servo. This I actually have recently found that the one shot actually works better for when I'm doing like studio type of pictures, and then I do AI servo when I am doing like in their cage photography. And then lastly, I use auto white balance because I find it works fine for me. So yeah, those are the camera settings that I use. So now that you know what kind of lighting to use and what kind of camera and lenses work best, you can go ahead and start taking pictures of your hamsters while they're in their cage. You can get some really adorable pictures where your hamsters are running around. In fact, some of the best pictures are when they're exploring their cage. But if you want to take your hamster photography to the next level, I'm going to talk about Putting your hamsters on sets and making little props and scenes. So the first thing you're going to need for your hamster studio sets is obviously some backgrounds and some props. So there are lots of different types of backgrounds that you can use, but probably the simplest, most basic, and cheapest ones that you can get are poster paper. At least I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. I literally have never called it poster paper until this point, and I'm feeling like I'm forgetting the name, but for now all I can think of is poster paper, so we'll go with poster paper. But basically what it is you can get this at the dollar store, at Walmart, pretty much any grocery store too, and it is that cardboard like big poster board sort of thing that is flexible like paper and is kind of shiny on one side. They come in like black and white, and I believe they come in other colors like neon pinks and greens too. These are really great because they're nice and big, but they're the perfect size for doing hamster photography. You can also use wrapping paper as your backgrounds. I have used this plenty of times before too, and you can just tape it to the top of wherever you're going to be taking pictures. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second, but it can get really big so you have more room to take pictures while the hamster's moving around, so that's a really great option too. One of my favorites is going to the craft store like Michael's, or even just any store and getting like a booklet of scrapbook paper. And this is really great because they come in so many different designs. You can come up with so many different themes with this. And most of the time they are really cheap. Like most scrapbook paper is between 20 and 40 cents per sheet. And if you get sparkly scrapbook paper and you have a lens that can create blurry backgrounds like I talk about, then you can create some really cool bokeh effects. So next you're going to need some props for your set. This can be pretty much anything as long as it is safe for your hamster. There are so many different props that you can use, from hamster toys themselves to like miniature setups to ceramic things from thrift stores. There are just so many things around your house even that make adorable hamster photo props. So just use your creativity and see what you can find and come up with for hamster photo props, and find props that are for specific themes. For example, I used some seashells and a little treasure chest to create this underwater theme with Toodles. Just remember that your hamster's safety always comes first, so never take your chances on anything that is dangerous or questionable. So now you're going to need a place to do your little photo set. I am lucky enough to have a spot in my wardrobe that is absolutely perfect for doing hamster photo shoots. So if you have like a little cupboard or wardrobe, that is great. However, if you don't, I was always doing it on the floor before I had my wardrobe. So I just like put a poster board on the ground and then put like a scrapbook paper on the edge of the wall and taped it on there, and that worked really good for me. So if you don't have a wardrobe, then that can work for you. Once you have a safe location for your hamster to take pictures, you can go ahead and start setting up the scene. Use your scrapbook paper or poster board, whatever you're using, to lay against the wall and the floor, and go ahead and add your props and create the scene. Now, if you own hamsters, you probably know that most of them have very short attention spans when taking pictures on set. So one of my tips is to not bring your hamster on set right away. What you're going to want to do is find a small stuffed animal that is around the size of your hamster. Here I was lucky enough to have a little stuffed hamster that I use as my model for getting my settings correct and just kind of playing around with the set. And then while your little stuffed hamster is on set, you can play around with your lighting position. Probably the best lighting position is at a 45-degree angle from the hamster. If you go off to the side, you can probably create some really cool dramatic lighting. So before you bring your hamster out, just play around with the lighting and figure out what works best. So like I said, hamsters have very short attention spans, and it can be really hard, especially with hyper hamsters, to get them to sit still or look at the camera even just for a second. A lot of hamsters, it's even impossible. So I'm just going to share what I do for my hamsters. So just like with taming, food and treats is probably going to be your very best friend when trying to get your hamster to cooperate on set. So one thing that I recommend is doing your photo shoots right before you fill up their dish. If you do it right after you fill up their dish for the night, then they're probably going to have already selected their favorite treats and eaten them, and they'll be less likely to accept their favorite treats from you, and more likely to run off the set and want to explore than eat their treats. Don't bring your hamster on set just yet. You're going to want to take your treats and place them next to the object that you want your hamster to be at, and then they're going to take the treat, and when they look up from the treat, you're going to want to snap your pictures. Another thing that I use when I really want them to be by a specific object is take a little bit of baby food or unsweetened applesauce and just brush a little bit behind the prop for them to lick up, so that they'll go over to the little prop and they'll lick up the applesauce, and then when they look up, you can go ahead and snap away your pictures. And that's my next tip, is to just take a lot of pictures, and if you just keep shooting away while they're on set, make sure you have your memory card cleared up and you're bound to come away with at least 1 or 2 good pictures. Make sure that you don't stress your hamster out and leave them on the set too long. When they get tired and they're done, put them back. You don't want this to be a negative experience. You want it to be a positive experience for them, a time when they're like, oh, this is the time that I get free treats and get to be a total model for the camera. So make sure you listen to your hamster's body language and put them back when they're ready. Step for getting good hamster pictures is post-processing. Now, you might not need this at all if you get the lighting all perfect and everything, but sometimes it can be really helpful, especially if the picture is too dark. If you shoot in RAW, then you can bring up the lighting. You also might need to clone something out that you don't want there, or just doing little adjustments like increasing the contrast a little bit and sharpening up your picture can really make it look nice. So the program that I use is Adobe Lightroom 5. I'm not exactly sure how much it is, but you do have to pay money for it. However, I got mine for a really good price off of eBay. There are lots of different photo editing things that you can use. Photoshop, which is even better than mine, I think. But you can use GIMP. You can use one that I really like. In fact, I used for a very long time. Is called Photoscape. It's only available for Windows, I believe, not for Macintosh computers. But if you do have a Windows computer, it's free and it's just amazing. You can add text and stickers to it, as well as adding cool Instagram type effects. And another thing you can use is your photo editing apps to brighten up your picture. But just making little adjustments like contrast and adding a little bit of saturation or whatever can really make your pictures pop. Alright, so that is it for my hamster photography tips. I know this video is like super crazy long, but I just really wanted to make a video of all the hamster photography tips that I know to share with you. If you just wanted some tips on how to do hamster photography, so hopefully you enjoyed it. It was just really in-depth and really long, I know, but like I said, hopefully you enjoyed it and learned something from it, and I guess I will see you in my next video. Thank you for watching. Bye!